just revisit road safety? And I'm just trying to do some fact-finding here. There's no right or wrong in all of this. I just want to do some fact-finding. So the National Road Safety Strategy 2011-2020 targets a reduction of 30% both fatalities and serious injuries. It's easy to count the deaths. How close are we to being able to measure serious injuries at a national level using a nationally consistent definition of serious injury, given that it's 2017, all but gone?
Yes, Senator. I'll pass to Mr James to respond to that.
Thanks, James, General Manager, Road Safety and Productivity. As you mentioned, it's been a challenge.
I don't need a recap, I just need to know when we're going to get a nationally consistent measuring stick.
Currently there is a pilot project with the states and territories, a national project led by the department, and it is close to finishing its report.
This year?
Yes, in time for, hopefully, for the Ministers' meeting in November. And then if that pilot shows it is possible to use a single definition and to match the data properly between health and crash sources, that would then proceed to do the full matching and a retrospective cast for 10 years next year.
Okay.
So
in 2018, we anticipate we will have a nationally consistent definition of serious injury, which is 7 years after we started.
that is the aim, Senator.
Thank you. Now, in 2017, the Minister announced 2 pieces of research would be undertaken, one to look at drug driving and one to look at distracted driving. I understand the research has been completed. When do we expect the results to be released?
Soon, Senator, soon.
So, Senator, the Ministers will consider those reports at a Road Safety Ministers meeting sorry, on the 9th of October, followed by the Ministerial Council meeting on the 10th. Sorry.
November.
Sorry, did I say September? My apologies, sorry.
Okay, and a question on notice. Since the disbanding of the former Federal Office of Road Safety, which I think was in 1999, can you provide a history of resourcing from around 1998 to today? I want to see a trajectory of how many people used to be there and how many people are now on notice. Someone want to take that?
I'm happy to take on our best endeavours in that regard, Senator.
I'm just conscious
that we'll do whatever we can in relation to that.
What level of funding do you currently provide to a Australasian New Car Assessment Project program?
Senator, it's somewhere in the order of $1 million a year.
$1 million.
I will confirm that for you, though.
And is that funding guaranteed through, the forward estimates? I mean, are they getting it?
I think the current arrangement is that the current contract expires next year, Senator, and will be reconsidered again at that stage. But it's been funded for many years since.
But your evidence here tonight is that it's the preeminent mechanism for consumers to make a judgment about road safety.
About the safety of its vehicle, of a vehicle, Senator.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you aware that they conducted a test very recently of a 11-year-old Toyota versus a new Toyota in a head-on collision, and are you aware of the results of that test?
Yes, Senator, it clearly showed how much our standards have improved over the years.
Yes.
It was, I'm sure you've seen the photographs as well and watched the footage. It was extremely confronting to see the difference in the standards.
And are you aware that the vehicle that was used in a test, the 11-year-old vehicle, was being marketed by the retailer or motor vehicle reseller as a car suitable for a young driver?
Senator, this is one of the issues that Minister Chester has...
Are you aware of that?
Yes, Senator.
So we know that 11-year-old vehicles are not as good as today's vehicles. Pretty well, everybody gets that. But those 11-year-old vehicles have been marketed to the most vulnerable road users as a good car for a young driver. And we know from the result of that test that the young driver will be dead and the person in the other vehicle would have survived.
So, Senator, have you seen the work being done on the used car safety ratings and the alignment with the ANCAP safety ratings as well?
With $1 million worth of federal funding, you're trying to crack a nut that's costing the economy $32 billion, that's killing 1,300 people and injuring an unquantified number of people in serious injuries. That's the sum total of the federal government, federal departments, 1 million plus 12 people battling the world in another section.
No, I think it's hard for the witness to respond to those things.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Well, so...
But is the funding of $1 million guaranteed over four
No, I
estimates?
understand that, but he needs
Senator,
to
will
draw
be
that question.
reconsidered by government at the end of the contract.
Okay. So, given that there are a number of really professional, well-regarded research groups in the community, two would be the Australian College of Road Safety, the other would be AAA. Both of those entities have published comprehensive reports and suggestions for improving road safety, many of which are simple and non-regulatory and could be introduced without waiting for the current review of the NRSS. Has there been any government response to these recommendations? Do you, as a department, did you receive the AAA?
We have, Senator, and there's been exchanges between the department and the organisations, and they've, of course, written to the Minister as well.
So is there an official response? The Australian Automobile Association presented me with a copy of their proposals being presented to the department and the Minister. Is there an official response? Do you pick low-hanging fruit? Things that could be introduced simply without regulatory impact. Do you do that sort of stuff?
Senator, we look at these submissions and we provide advice on them, and a number of the ideas, many of them in those submissions, are certainly being considered by the states and federal government in the context of developing the next National Road Safety Strategy Action Plan. And that's a process, obviously, of negotiating what everyone can commit to for that exercise.
Does the department, having concluded a research program on tech's distraction driving or distracted driving, do you have any, do you facilitate or encourage field trials or tests of devices which would limit access to texts and emails while driving in the Commonwealth fleet?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator, but that is suggestions such as that in all vehicles is part of what's canvassed in the report that Mr James was talking about.
And there's certainly work I'm aware of with the states and territories. Again, there is some active research that's being done on these types of technologies, and work between us all on what might be the most promising ones going forward. But that's work in progress at the moment.
So, work-related road safety is a really significant issue for all organisations that employs people in Australia. You see many of the leaders in mining introducing really smart, upfront policies, procedures to limit, distraction in vehicles. Does the federal government have a policy position in respect to this? Can I get a job with the Commonwealth and go out in a Commonwealth car and happily text and email on my way to wherever I'm going, or do you have a policy position that says you don't do that?
Well, Senator, it's currently illegal to do that. Yeah. So if I was driving a Commonwealth vehicle and was doing that, I would be acting illegally.
Yeah, so you're relying on the police. You're not switching it off in the vehicle.
We're not undertaking additional activities at the moment, Senator.
Why not?
But if Minister Chester is working with his state and territory colleagues at the moment to investigate what more could be done in relation to distraction. And part of that is talking with manufacturers about what other technologies might be used in vehicles.
Senator, if I could add, there's also a group called the National Road Safety Partnership Program, which involves a number of mining companies and other firms interested in road safety, which a number of states and other organisations involved in, to look at how to get to road safety into fleet practices and corporate practices and business. And that's an active piece, a group that's been working. I met with them only a couple of weeks ago in Perth.
So if I was to deduce from your answer that you don't actually have a policy in place about what people should and shouldn't do when they're driving a motor vehicle, Ms Zelke, you simply say, well, they should have known it's illegal, the police will catch them if they do it. Is that the answer?
Senator, I was just stating the obvious, that it is an illegal activity at the moment.
And we know that thousands of people are fined every day. And we do know that people break the rules. So I'm asking whether your department has a policy on, observance of limitations on texting and emailing in a Commonwealth car.
Our department does not have a policy in addition to the current fact that it's illegal to do that.
Okay.
Senator, we expect all public servants to not undertake any illegal activity. So we have not, at this stage, seen it necessary to develop an additional policy to prevent public servants from behaving illegally. We expect them to behave legally. In terms of the issues you're raising about the legality of these issues, they are issues that are dealt with by the police through their activities at the state level, but the department is actively looking at other ways we can encourage people not to undertake these activities. As Mr James said earlier, we've got a number of areas that we're looking into. So we are not vacant from this issue. We are looking into this issue. If that is your question.
I employed a small number of people who had a small number of vehicles. No smoking in the vehicles, you don't drink when you're driving, you do not text or answer the phone. They were the rules. It clearly explained to anyone who was issued the keys to a car. And the reason for that was I wanted the car to last a while. I didn't want it to be in a pram because someone was texting or phoning. I didn't rely on the fact that there might be a policeman driving past. I explicitly explained to people what you needed to do if you wanted to take the keys of that car out on the road and do a job. You don't do that.
All public servants understand that they should not be drinking in a vehicle, they should not be drinking at work, they should not be texting in a vehicle where they're
I'm
driving.
talking about any drinks, I'm talking about concentrate on the job that you're doing. But you don't give any instructions to people at all.
Senator, I think that's exactly what the Secretary is saying, that the expectation is exactly the same on the members of the public service. And you seem to be, and seemed to have been for a while, Senator, sort of asserting somehow that the department doesn't take road safety extremely seriously. Now, I appreciate your very genuine concern on this, and it's a long-standing concern. I've been here across the table from you on a number of occasions when you're raising this. But Senator, I can't let you just sort of keep making this assertion that the department's somehow not taking it seriously. We're spending $685 million on the Black Spot program, $420 on the Bridges Renewal program, $328 million on the Heavy Vehicle Safety and Productivity program, over $1.5 billion for safety-related upgrades on the Bruce Highway, upgrading the Pacific Highway, and those things are all really important, Senator, and there's a really strong safety component running through all of that. So while I appreciate your concern, I certainly can't sit here and let you infer that somehow the department's not taking road safety extremely seriously.
Thank you, Minister, and I'm sure that other people will draw their own conclusions about the leadership or otherwise of the department in road safety. Can I go to the answer of questions on notice about the underspend? Someone got the underspend figures there?
I hope that adequately explained that it's not actually an underspend for you, Senator.
Is that question?
Well, the efficiency
133?
dividend for the department was 1%, is that correct? Was that generally what you were asked to provide, an efficiency dividend of 1%?
The last efficiency dividend.
Because it looks to me as if the figure of savings in road safety were closer to 3%.
Senator, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty putting the response to the question together with where you are going.
So we said there were underspends of 666 and 866, and you've come back and said that they were not underspends, but departmental funds were adjusted downwards to reflect the effects of the efficiency dividends, and whole of government savings applies to the department's appropriation. So
So what the figures were actually doing was comparing what we had available to us in past years and the changes. So it wasn't available to us to spend. So therefore it wasn't an underspend.
It was a reduction.
Well, you can only have an underspend, Senator, if you actually have funding available to you to spend.
Okay. So I suppose my point was there was a line item for road safety and we
There
didn't
was,
need to
some
spend it. And
depreciation.
you're saying, well, we never got the money to spend on it.
So, Senator, there were also depreciation figures included in that. I'm sorry, I must admit this is a question that you gave at about 11:15, as I recall, at last estimates, and I wasn't quick enough to realise that the page we were looking at wasn't actually about program funding. It was about a list of different areas that sit under the area that we classify as road safety from an outcomes perspective.
Right. So it remains that whether you either didn't have the money in that, it was either an efficiency dividend or you never had the money to spend. Is that what you told me now?
Yes, Senator.
Okay.
We
So
have
what I
less
thought
money.
was a spend on road safety wasn't.
So the department has, I suppose, had reductions to its departmental funding, and all areas of the department are impacted by that, and that flows through to road safety as well.
Okay. So who does a group or a interested party talk to in the department if they want to get some clarity in respect to ADR rules or fuel rules or whatever? Is there anybody they can talk to?
Service Transport Policy Division is responsible for all of those. So Mr Folds is the Executive Director of that area.
Who is it?
Mr Folds is the Executive Director of that area. Ms Nakanyama is responsible for vehicle safety standards, which includes Australian design rules. And Mr James is responsible for road safety and a range of other activities, such as heavy vehicles and the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator.
Okay. So if we look at Senator Rice's, and I'll finish with two more questions, Senator Rice's line of questioning about vehicle standards in Europe and the emission standards in Europe, we are importing cars from Europe. Are you saying that we don't produce fuel that they can run on?
Senator, the industry advice is that they would need a different type of fuel to be as efficient as we would like them to be. So at the moment there are vehicles that are of a better quality, from an emissions perspective, more fuel efficient, produced in Europe. However, when they use the fuel that we have available in Australia, they are not as efficient as they would be in Europe. So what the manufacturers do is they actually alter the way in which the cars run so as they can be as efficient as possible with the fuel available in Australia, but they're not as efficient as they would be in Europe.
Okay. Are you saying that the few refineries we have left supply all the fuel for the whole of Australia? I thought our diesel came
Senator.
from Korea.
No, they don't, Senator.
So I thought our diesel was refined and imported from Korea. Is that wrong?
And therefore, sorry, Senator, I'm not able to give you a direct answer to that question. Ms Whelan took on notice to come back in relation to the number of refineries, etc. Also happy to come back in relation to what fuels are actually refined in Australia as
So who's
opposed to
the
what's
industry?
bought in.
Is the industry the 3 or 4 refineries we've got?
And other retail providers of fuels as well.
Okay. So we've now instigated, well, we haven't, the Minister has instigated an inquiry into road safety. What's happening there? That's a fairly short-running inquiry. I think it's reporting in February, is that correct?
Senator Marcus James, General Manager, Road Safety and Productivity. The co-chairs, Associate Professor Jeremy Woolley and Dr John Crozier, have been asked to report back by April next year.
Yep. And generally, what are the processes? They'll have public inquiries, public hearings,
Yes,
stakeholder involvement.
they've advertised for or put up on the web for submissions to be made to the inquiry. They're conducting some research and interviews with stakeholders on a targeted basis at the moment. They were in Canberra last week. and they're proposing to now do that in other parts of Australia. And they are going to, for example, talk to road safety ministers in early November when they meet as well. So they're well underway at this stage.
Minister, are you aware that point-to-point cameras which detect infringements by heavy vehicles in New South Wales, were they to actually detect infringements by all vehicles, may turn up about, 800 more light vehicles than trucks?
No, Senator, I'm not aware of that.
So is anybody in the department aware of that?
Portfolio responsibility.
Point-to-point cameras restricted to heavy vehicles, so you can actually see light vehicles speeding deliberately. Is anybody aware of that in the...
Senator, we're aware that they're used for heavy vehicles and not for light vehicles. Yes, Senator.
Yeah, and are you aware that the number of light vehicles deliberately breaking the law because it's not against the law as yet on those point-to-point cameras? Are you
Which
aware
is
of that?
a policy set by the New South Wales government.
No, but I'm not asking that.
I'm not aware of the numbers, no, Senator, because we're not privy to that
But
information.
we are aware it's likely to be a reasonable number. So
A reasonable number. It's a really, really high number. And you as the federal department have no concerns with that? There's federally funded infrastructure in place. It's applied to heavy vehicles and they're fine, or they're regulated. But for every truck that's doing it, there's probably 80 cars that are doing it, and you're happy for that infrastructure to sit there and allow
Senator,
people to
this
break
is
the
of
rules?
course a decision for state and territory governments, and again, Minister Chester continues to raise a range of issues with all of the states and territories in relation to road safety, and there will be various discussions at the Road Safety Ministers meeting coming up on the 9th of November, of which I expect that would be part of the conversation.
We're getting closer.
Sorry, Senator?
Who paid for the point-to-point cameras?
I don't know, Senator. I'd need to take that on notice.
the states do.
States.
Yeah, and the Minister has raised it on a number of occasions, I'm aware, and it's actually in the current National Road Safety Strategy, the extension, expansion of point-to-point cameras as a means to promote road safety.
And it's so I will drive from Adelaide to Port Wakefield. I will know that I'm under a point-to-point camera, whether I'm in a light vehicle, a heavy vehicle, or a motorbike. And yet somehow in New South Wales, one of our busiest road networks, we only ping the truck drivers and not the other motorists who are speeding.
There are other jurisdictions, of course, too, Senator, that have the same approach. They won't install them as a policy approach.
Senator Gillick,
I'm going to finish with this. So what does the federal department, what policy settings do you take, if I return to the minister's earlier point, where you control the funding for infrastructure? Do you actually, as you did with .05, do you actually tie safety outcomes to the enormous spend of Commonwealth money?
Senator, that is an issue for government to consider. I know it's part of the discussion at the moment.
I haven't given up. I will return in
So
whatever it is.